Keely, I am so excited to walk through your house and tell you what I think you should do with it. I can see why you entered the contest. I can see that you've got some issues that you have to work with on this house. I love the house though. I think it has a ton of potential. There are some key areas though that I think are throwing you off, and so I'm going to go through each item and then I'm going to show you an overall reveal of what I think you should do to make a good cohesive look to the entire house. But let's start with the problem areas. First item is the front entryway. As much as I love the arch, I think that this is a big problem. I can't quite tell, I'm guessing on some things, but I'm assuming that the doors are 6'8" in height and the archway fully cuts you off. So when you're standing at this door, which is the operable door, somebody's gonna hit their head on that arch. So I think that that, unfortunately, as much as I like arches, might need to be changed. The fact that the door is actually on an angle is a little bit of a problem, but I'm gonna try to make changes to the house that don't involve major structural alterations, just to make it a little bit easier on the pocketbook, I guess. And I don't know what's happening with the layout inside, but I'm gonna do my best guess without ripping things apart, okay? Next item I think that we have is these triple arched windows. I don't quite know what's happening there, but the arches on those are fighting with the arch at the front entryway. Looking at this upper floor in here, there's a balcony that's kind of a partial balcony, throwing this window off center from down below. And then it looks like there's kind of a railing happening here, but there's not actually a balcony. So I kind of don't know what's happening with that whole element. It also looks like above the front door, there's potentially a clock or something that looks like it's an old clock that no longer works. That's an interesting element. I also am looking at this piece here above the carport. I think that the carport itself is a bit of an issue. The columns are very, very small, ill-proportioned in scale, but this like trellis scenario that's happening up here is another thing that's sort of distracting and taking your eye away from the house. When I look at it, what I was really drawn to actually was the fact of the chimney. I love the massing of it. I think a chimney on the front of a house is something that's really cool. It's one of my faves. That's why I have one on my house. But the cinder block look, not right for the house. Obviously, it needs some textural component to it. It needs to feel warm and welcoming, not institutional as it's sort of looking like right now. The other thing is we've got sort of a rock dash stucco with this pattern stucco. So we've got different stuccos that are happening. It's clashing. It looks like it's done from different eras. That's a tough one. And lastly, another item that I'm struggling with is the raked window on top of this window scenario here. There's no other raked windows on the house, so it feels foreign. It kind of feels like we're going for a mountain vibe when the other things on the house are not a mountain vibe. And then it actually appears like the wall is on an angle here. Now, I'm all for flared walls and angled walls, but this whole piece, the whole room is actually skewed a little bit. So that's an area of concern that I would want to deal with as well. So overall, I think that those are the major points that we're sort of struggling with as we look at this house. Oh, actually, the water meter. Water meter, front and center. It's the one thing that you see when you walk up to the front door. I'd like to address that without moving it, but just to kind of hide it. I also think that the landscaping is a little bit weak for scale and massing to help sort of anchor the house. So I think that we could work with those areas as well. It's predominantly grasses right now. I'm assuming that in winter, be it that you're in Prince George, the grasses are all gonna die and be gone. So you have no planting on the front of the house and everything will just look barren. So I'd like to address that and work with some kind of planting on the front. But there you have it. That's my list of areas that we need to tackle. I know it's a big list, but let's go through and I'll show you what I'm thinking we can do to sort of address each one of those spots. Well, I've toned down the picture here in the background so that when I do my overlay on this, you'll be able to see the changes to the house, but it does help in context to have it in the background. So here we go. Here's the reveal. All right. You can see that I've altered a few windows, I've added some rock texture, I've added a new front entryway, I've closed in the garage, there's a bunch of things. So let's go through it one by one and I'll explain why I did what I did. So we're gonna start on the far side of the house over on the living room. So I actually think that all I would do is I would remove that rake window and I would put in a window with some grids. Gives detail, layers to the house, a more traditional component on an overall traditional house. I also have, it doesn't quite show up here, but I think I would actually add a little bit of an accent wall that kind of comes off the side, a little bit of a flare wall that extends past, just adds that sort of Belgian charm to the house. I also have clad the whole chimney in stone. You can see that we've got this all in a stone material, and I'm thinking actually to do something like this that's got some really good texture to it. Something that has some horizontal pieces and some large web wall pieces that gives a little bit of variety to it, that feels a little bit rustic. I would overgrout it right to the face of the stone so that there's some thick mortar joints on it. I would blend the mortar with the rock. It will just give it that nice old world feel. As we get over to the entryway, I actually think that as I mentioned before, we need to get rid of the arch. So I would square off the entryway in its entirety, and then I would actually line the inside with a different material. Now I like how the current house actually had that sort of wood stain on that inset. I think it adds something to the house. I think it's kind of an interesting element, but I would maybe tone it down. So I would maybe use something like this mushroom opaque color, which is from Benjamin Moore or from Sanson Stains actually. And I would do the doors and the wall paneling in the same color so that it sort of blends, the whole entire piece, it blends into one. Now, part of the reason for that is that the doors are on an angle. It's kind of an awkward thing. And I think that by painting it all in one color, it will help to sort of mitigate that concern. I also like the natural wood tone of that on the house. And then what I would do is I would play with all of the beams and all of the brackets that we've added to the house. And I would do that also in this same color so that you've got a nice wood tone sort of happening throughout the house. As I look at the beams that are currently on the house right now, I think they need to be beefed up in scale, and I think that we need to add some large knee braces to it. I know that the current house has a knee brace on this on the upper beam in the top gable, but I think that by softening it with a larger 6x6, something that's curved, it just adds a little bit of a softness to the house as opposed to all these just harsh straight lines. So that's something that I would maybe play with a little bit on there. I also think that the front entryway needs to have some presence because of where that clock was that was located up above it. The clock, because I don't know what's happening behind there, I don't know if I can add a window or not. I didn't want to embellish it with a fake vent or anything like that. So what I've done is created this large canopy roof that actually helps to give the approach to the front door like a front porch would have. I didn't add any posts down to the ground, although you could, but I've got these large braces that are sort of an overscaled element that helps to carry the weight of that roof canopy. Now, I think that roof canopy could be a standing seam metal or a copper roof per se, something maybe it has a soft swoop on it so it pulls up on the curvature of some of the brackets. Just again, another thing that's a little bit soft. But I would pull that roof up the house. I would actually make it quite substantial. If it's just a small little skirt roof, it's gonna get lost. It's gonna feel like it's just a tacked on embellishment, and it needs to look weighty enough. It needs to take up some of that blank space, that's sort of all that wall space that's up above the doors. And so the front porch, the scale of it, very, very important. Next item I think that we need to address is this window scenario here. Now, as you know, it's got the 3 arches on it. I would just leave the header that's in there. I would pop that window out and I would take the window down to approximately 2 feet off the ground, okay? So I would actually make this window and the window in the far left. I think the far left window is actually a living room, it looks like, but I would make sure that those windows are the same, have the same sill height across, just for a continuity across the front and just to help give balance to your eye. I know that the height of the window on the left is probably going to be a bit taller just based on the fact that that room has a vault. But if you could match the heights of those windows, that would also help. It just gives consistency, keeps the eye moving across the house, and doesn't have all this kind of crazy movement going on. It will feel more cohesive. I also played with this upper balcony. Now, as you know, you've got this odd balcony that's sort of off to the center. Well, I'm thinking that you need to enclose that balcony and encompass that space within the room. I'm not sure what that room is that's right there, but the window is just, it's a wrong scale, wrong size. So what I've done is I've actually removed all of this planking that's on there. And then the thought is take the window, move it over, increase the size of it, bring it down to 24 inches, 18 inches off the floor, something like that, and center it on the window that's down below. Again, lining up your eye, it will just help all distraction to kind of go away. I would add shutters to that window. I think that that window upstairs would appreciate some charm to it. I think it's a neat little character window. It helps to break up some of the blank wall face that would be around it. And I just think it adds that extra special little touch. Moving on to the garage door. I know that it's a carport right now. If it was my ideal world, I would enclose it and I would put an actual garage door on it. You could just build this arch and enclose the space by putting in walls or back framing it and leaving it open. If you didn't want to close it in, at least it would completely change the facade. And I would do an elliptical arch where it kind of has an arch in the center and then arches on the side. Again, it's a little complicated to do, but again, these character elements that will just make the house sing. If you do a garage door, I do a custom door from Clope, and I would do something with a really interesting plank on it, probably some window in the top, just adds another layer to the door. It brings natural light into the garage, especially if you close in the side. You could just do a full plank door as well on there, which would also look good. It might help to cut the cost a little bit and then add some windows on the side of the garage. I think that there needs to be some sconces in large scale on either side of the garage door. I would do something in a copper per se, like this. It will patina over time, it will age. Again, it will give that sort of old world look to it, but something large, hey, if you could bring a gas line to it, have the flicker of a gas lantern, that would be a knockout, but just go with electrical. That's your easiest bet. Lastly is closing in this upper portion. I have predominantly done the front of the house in stucco. I'm thinking just do the whole entire front in a smooth, in a smooth sort of sand finish. And then obviously the planking on that door inset will really, really sing. The stucco color that you could use a really light stucco like this. This is crushed ice from Sherwin-Williams, or a little bit darker of a beigey taupe. And this is called Amazing Gray, also from Sherwin-Williams. And if you wanted to play with your fascia boards, those are your main roof line that runs across the top, and possibly the shutters on these windows. You could do a color, something like this, which is Gauntlet Gray from Sherwin-Williams. You could also do your windows in this color, which would look absolutely amazing if you wanted some contrast of wall color to window color, and then again, your fascias and all that. And then if you added that wood tone into things, it would really help to pop and to add another layer to the house. A couple last things that I wanted to touch on was the landscaping. You remember how you have that water meter that's right in the front? Well, what I'm thinking of that you should do is I think that you should do some sort of an evergreen, some kind of an evergreen tree or a shrub, something that is conular, that's going to grow up in height and that will remain green all year round. I would flank on either side of the door, and then I would add one here. So technically I would add 3 across there. That tree will stand right in front of the water meter and it will help to disguise it so that you don't actually notice it. And then I would play with these flower beds in here and right in here, and I would fill those with some kind of a boxwood or an evergreen plant that is going to stand up to the winters that you've got, but that will remain green all year round. So that spring, summer, fall, and winter, you're going to be covered in snow most likely, but at least you've got an anchor point here of some solid greenery. And then I would play with this side over in here and do some other kind of planting that's going to be native to your area, that's going to stand up well and just give some nice foliage there. But I do think that doing it in larger beds is going to look better than just miscellaneous single little plants. I think you need to do full beds of one type of plant. It's gonna look way, way more intentional. I would also add a tree on this corner just to help anchor the side of the house, something that's quite substantial. It doesn't have to be an evergreen, it could be a deciduous tree that just looks absolutely beautiful in fall. Maybe it's a Japanese maple tree or something like that that's gonna give you some beautiful color as the seasons change. Now, and pertaining to the exterior colors, I also want to emphasize that these are just colors that I've given as a quick suggestion, but you can go onto our shop and you can pick either the Belgian farmhouse scheme or my personal house scheme. It would absolutely look awesome with this house. I think that every element would play perfectly on it. It's a great option for you if putting this together on your own is going to be a little bit too complicated. It's literally a click away and it's yours. And it'll give you all the information, give you pinpoints to everything that you need to do for the colors on your house. There's just a few tips that I think you could do with the overall. I want to emphasize though that I think beefing up all of those beams is going to make big impact, and those curved brackets that sort of go underneath those beams to support it, because the overhang is very, very heavy. It will give it that European sort of chalet feel to the house. It will help to cover up a bit of the blank space of the walls. And by doing all of those things, I think your house will be an absolute knockout.